Hi, my name is Liora, and at 34, I never thought I'd be scrubbing blood off the tile of the house my grandmother built with her bare hands. It should have been a homecoming, but instead, it became a crime scene. They said she slipped, that it was natural, peaceful. But grief has a scent, and it wasn't lavender and lemon that night. It was lies, soaked into the wood. For years, I played the good girl while they rewrote her will behind closed doors. "You're not our priority right now," they said, when I asked why I wasn't even listed as next of kin. "Before I tell you how I turned their betrayal into justice, like this video if you've ever been treated like you were disposable in your own family. And hit subscribe because this story deserves to be heard." The night it all broke apart wasn't quiet. Seattle rain isn't just background noise. It's something you feel in your bones. It slaps the windows, howls through alleyways, makes even the warmest homes feel like they're holding their breath. But that night, I wasn't in a warm home. I was on the porch of Nana Elise's Victorian, the house where I'd spent half my childhood summers. And I stood frozen in the amber glow of the porch light, watching my father shove her into the storm. I can still hear it. The screech of the door, the thunder crashing behind his voice. "She's fading fast. Stop spending on her," he barked, like she was a burden, not the woman who raised him. Nana's coat was too thin for the night. It clung to her small frame, soaked and shivering, her silver hair plastered to her cheeks. Her hands, always delicate, always trembling, clutched something to her chest. A sketchbook, one of her old ones. Probably the same one I used to peek into as a child when she thought I was asleep. She didn't speak at first, just looked at him, then at me. Her eyes, cloudy with age but still too full of understanding, met mine like they were asking a question I didn't know how to answer. I stepped forward. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" "She signed the deed. It's done," he said, brushing past me like he hadn't just dumped an 83-year-old woman onto wet pavement. His shirt was still tucked, tie unwrinkled. He always looked polished when he did something cruel. The contrast made me sick. "She didn't understand what she was signing," I snapped. She's dying, Liora, and we're not wasting another dime pretending otherwise." That word, wasting. He said it like her life was an old receipt he didn't want to account for anymore. I crouched down beside her. The rain soaked through my jeans instantly. Nana's fingers were purple at the tips, but she still held that sketchbook like it mattered more than anything else. "Come on, we're leaving," I whispered. She didn't resist, just let me help her up slowly, her breath rasping in short gasps. My umbrella lay on the porch steps, forgotten, but I barely noticed. I wrapped my coat around her shoulders, shielding her as best I could. My hands shook, but not from the cold. Behind us, the Victorian loomed, still beautiful, still grand, $1.8 million, according to the realtor flyers Torrin left on the kitchen table. Now it belonged to him. He made her sign under pressure. I wasn't there, but I knew how he operated. Quick decisions, fast signatures, and always when no one was looking. I didn't turn back. In the car, Nana's breath fogged the glass. I cranked the heat. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, but she hadn't let go of that sketchbook. I glanced at her while waiting at the red light. "Why didn't you tell me he was pressuring you?" She didn't answer right away, just traced her thumb along the book's frayed spine. "He was your father," she finally said. "I didn't want to make you choose." A horn blared behind me. I hadn't realized the light turned green. I pressed the gas, but my throat felt tight. She didn't want to make me choose, but he already had. Back at my apartment, I helped her inside, dried her off, made tea she didn't drink. I tried not to cry when I peeled her shoes off. Her socks were soaked, her skin paper-thin and cold. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands still wrapped around that sketchbook. I wanted to scream, at him, at her, at the rain that wouldn't stop. But all I could do was kneel in front of her and say, "You're safe now. You're staying with me." She looked up, eyes glassy. "I don't have much time, honey." My heart pinched. "Don't say that." She gave a tired little smile. "You always looked just like her when you were mad." She didn't have to say who her was. My mother. Maris hadn't even come outside. She just stood in the hallway, arms folded, face turned to the wall, silent. I blinked hard. "You're not dying." "Maybe not tonight," she said gently, finally setting the sketchbook down. Then she looked toward the rain-slicked window. I just didn't want to die in that house. My throat burned. I reached for the sketchbook. The cover was warped from the rain, pages stuck together near the edges. But the ink was still there, fine lines, delicate shapes. Flowers, a cathedral dome, a little girl's face. Mine, maybe. I wanted to say something comforting, something adult, but I just sat there, listening to the rain, watching her breathe. And that was the moment I realized something about that night didn't add up. The heater in my apartment hissed like it was struggling to keep up. The walls always held a faint chill, too thin, too close to the alley, where the wind clawed through cracks I could never quite seal. But that night, it felt like the cold was inside us too. Nana sat hunched on my worn-out couch, wrapped in every blanket I could find. Her cough cut through the air like it had claws, sharp and unpredictable, shaking her body until I had to look away. I knelt beside her, one hand resting lightly on her knee. The tea I made sat untouched on the coffee table, steam long gone. I'd added honey, just like she used to for me when I was small and sleepless. But now her hands trembled too much to lift the cup. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. It slapped the windows with bitter rhythm, casting silver streaks of water across the glass. A street lamp flickered just beyond, its glow dull and uneven, like it couldn't decide whether to help or hide. I'm okay, Nana rasped, her voice paper thin. You're not, I whispered, but I've got you now. She gave me the smallest nod and looked down at the sketchbook still in her lap, her fingers brushing the warped corners like she was smoothing something broken. With a shaky breath, she flipped it open. The pages crackled, rain-damaged, but still intact. The ink bled in places, but her delicate lines still danced across the paper. A lighthouse, a child holding a kite, a birdcage with the door ajar. She tried to speak again but coughed instead, curling forward. I steadied her with both hands. Lie back, Nana. Just rest. She sank into the cushions like her body had been waiting for permission. Her breath wheezed out in small, ragged sighs. I pulled a quilt up to her chin and sat beside her, half watching her chest rise and fall. My mind raced with what had just happened. Not even 2 hours ago, my father had stood beneath the chandelier in Nana's front hallway, smiling like a man who thought he'd won. And maybe he had. He had the deed now. He had everything. Except her. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the sketchbook in her lap, and the way her fingers twitched even in sleep. But at some point, I moved to the window, pressing my forehead against the cold pane. The street below was quiet. No headlights, no movement. Until there were. A sleek black car turned the corner. It slowed by the curb. Headlights dimmed. Torrance car. I froze. He didn't get out, just idled there, engine humming low like a threat beneath the rain. My fingers curled into fists. He knew where I lived. Of course he did. And he wanted me to know he knew. After a minute, the engine revved. The car rolled forward and disappeared around the corner. But something in me stayed clenched. I turned back to Nana. Her eyes were closed. The sketchbook had slipped to the floor. I bent down, picked it up gently, and ran my fingers along the spine. The paper was fragile, warped in places, but her work was still vivid, layered with years of dreams and silence. I flipped the page. A painting of a girl sitting by a window, knees tucked to her chest. Her face was turned away, but I recognized the outline of her body. It was me. I was sure of it. Tears pressed hot behind my eyes. She'd been watching me all along, not judging, not interfering, just holding me on the page. The heater let out another groan. Nana stirred. I'm sorry, she murmured without opening her eyes. For what? I asked, my voice cracking. For letting him wear me down. I sat beside her again, brushing a damp strand of hair from her forehead. You didn't let him. He took everything. Her lips parted like she wanted to say more. Instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing mine before falling limply to her chest. I took her hand and held it tight. I'll take care of you now, I promised. He doesn't get to touch you again. She didn't reply, but her hand tightened slightly. The lights flickered once, twice, then held steady. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his silhouette on the porch. The way he said, "She's fading fast," like it was an excuse, like it was justification. I dreamed I was back in that house, except I wasn't me. I was a little girl again, crouched under the grand piano in the front room, hearing voices overhead. Nana's, his, my mother's, faint and breaking. In the dream, the chandelier above the piano started to sway. Light splintered across the walls. I held my breath. I was invisible again, powerless. When I woke, the sketchbook was still beside me. The couch creaked softly as I stood, every joint stiff from the night. Nana was awake, barely. Her gaze met mine as I walked to the kitchenette. "Liora," she said, voice dry and thin. "I'm here." She reached out a shaking hand. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let him bury me." The words hit like a slap. I crossed back to her, sinking to my knees again. "What do you mean?" She shook her head faintly, eyes slipping closed again. "Just promise." "I promise." She exhaled. "Good girl." Outside, the rain finally slowed, but inside me something had just begun to stir, a tight coil of something deeper than fear, deeper than grief. It felt like anger, but heavier, older, and suddenly I wondered, what else could he take from her, or me? The knock came just after noon, soft, hesitant, not like Torrens. I dried my hands on a dish towel, heart already tight in my chest. Nana was asleep on the couch, her breath shallow but steady, the sketchbook still clutched to her chest like a lifeline. When I opened the door, Maris stood there, hair done, lipstick perfect, umbrella tucked neatly at her side. She looked like she'd just come from brunch, not from the scene of her mother being thrown into a storm. "Can I come in?" Her voice was small, as if that made her more innocent. I stepped aside but didn't speak. She walked in like she didn't know how broken things were now, like this wasn't the first time I'd seen her since she turned her back and let Torren toss Nana out like trash. Her gaze flicked toward the couch, where Nana slept under 3 layers of blankets. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. No words, no apology, just tension wrapped in pearls and perfume. "She looks worse," she said finally. "She was outside in the rain for half an hour while you watched," I snapped. She flinched. "Good." Maris moved closer to Nana but didn't touch her. Instead, she set an envelope down on the table. Cash. Crisp bills stacked in a paper sleeve. "It's for her medication," she said, eyes on anything but mine. I didn't touch the envelope. "Now you care?" Her jaw twitched. "Don't start." "Start what? You stood there. You said nothing. You let him." "It's for the best," she whispered. She wasn't safe there anymore. My laugh came sharp and bitter. "She wasn't safe because of him, and you know it." Maris looked down at her hands. I watched them tremble, subtle, barely noticeable unless you were looking. I was. "You're scared of him," I said. "No," she lied. "He's just complicated." "You mean cruel?" "I mean powerful." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even sad. It was hollow, like she'd convinced herself she wasn't a part of this. "Why did you come here?" I asked. She didn't answer, just turned toward the door. Her heels clicked once on the hardwood floor. At the threshold, she paused. "Don't let her drag you down, Liora. You've got a life. Don't waste it chasing ghosts." And then she left. The door shut behind her with a click that felt like the snap of a bone. I stood still for a long time, eyes locked on the envelope. I didn't want her money. I didn't want their anything. But the meds were running out, and I hadn't had time to get to the pharmacy. My fingers hovered over it before I snatched it up and shoved it into the drawer, out of sight, out of mind. That night, as rain whispered against the windows again, Nana stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed, then focused. "Was that your mother?" I nodded slowly. "She always did what he asked," she murmured. "I know." Nana's eyes glistened. "She wasn't always like that." Her voice cracked, and something inside me cracked with it. I helped her sit up, propped her with pillows. She held the sketchbook in her lap, fingers trailing across the cover like she was reading Braille. Then she opened it slowly, page by page, eyes moving with a kind of quiet reverence. Then she stopped. There, tucked between 2 sketches, was a folded piece of paper. yellowed, tattered at the edges. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it free. "What's that?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just stared at it. Then she handed it to me. "There's more inside," she whispered. "You'll see." I unfolded it carefully. At first glance, it looked like one of her usual sketches. A room, detailed, but unfamiliar. It wasn't from my apartment, or the old house, as far as I could tell. The walls were lined with books, a painting above the fireplace, and there, centered on the page, was a small table. On it, something that looked like a safe. A safe? I turned the page over. No note, no explanation. I looked back at Nana. Her eyelids drooped again, the energy spent. "What is this?" I asked softly. Her lips moved, but no words came. Her breathing slowed again, and the questions began to snowball in my head. Was this a real place? Why sketch a safe? And why hide it here? I didn't sleep much again. The image haunted me. Something about it felt intentional, not just a drawing, a message, or maybe a map. In the morning, the sketch still sat on the table. Nana hadn't moved, her breath shallow, her pulse fluttery. I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, it buzzed with a new message, unknown number. "Let her go, before you regret it." No name, no context, just that. My stomach dropped. Torin. I paced the room, phone clutched in my hand like it might crack from how tightly I held it. He knew I had her. He was watching. He wanted me scared. But he didn't know about the sketch, or the hidden drawing. At least, I didn't think he did. I stood by the window and stared out at the street. A car slowed as it passed. Same model, same color. My fingers twitched. I stepped back from the glass. My chest throbbed with something I hadn't let myself feel until that moment. Not just fear, resolve. If he wanted to scare me into silence, he didn't know me at all. But one thing gnawed at the back of my mind. What secrets were buried in those pages? The rain paused the next morning, but the air stayed thick. That heavy stillness that always made Seattle feel like a city on the edge of remembering. I sat at the kitchen table, the sketch of the strange room with the safe laid out in front of me. Nana was still asleep, her breath faint but rhythmic, and for once I let myself breathe too, at least for a moment. I traced the lines she had drawn, trying to place the room, the bookshelves, the fireplace. It had to be from the old house, the one Torin now claimed as his, and suddenly the memory came rushing back. I was 10, sitting cross-legged in Nana's attic studio. My legs dangled over the scratchy carpet, stained with decades of paint spills and turpentine. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass window, scattering color across her work table. I watched her blend oils on her palette with that same gentle concentration I saw in her even now. Torin had stormed up the narrow attic stairs that day. He didn't knock. "What are you doing with her?" he barked at Nana, eyes already narrowed. "She's painting, Torin," she said calmly, like he hadn't just thrown open the door like a warning. "You're filling her head with nonsense. You think color and canvas will pay her bills one day?" "She's 10, Nana replied. "She's learning how to see." He scoffed. "She's learning how to starve." I'd clenched the brush tighter. The bristles bent under my grip. That was the first time I realized how much he hated beauty he couldn't own. Back in the present, I ran my thumb along the page's edge. Nana's sketch wasn't just a memory. It was a piece of something buried, and whatever it was, he didn't want it found. The silence broke with the ring of my phone. Torin. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then it rang again. Same name. Same pressure. I finally answered. "I told you," he said coldly. "You need to bring her back." "She's not property, Dad." "She's not your responsibility. She's not yours either." His voice dropped lower. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I could almost hear his jaw tighten. "I found her sketchbook," I said before I could stop myself. "She's been documenting everything." The pause that followed was long and sharp. "What did you just say?" I held the phone tighter. "You heard me. She's confused, Liora. You know that. She's sick. That book is just rambling." "No," I said, calmer now. "It's truth, and I'm not letting her be erased." His voice turned brittle. "You have no idea what you're stepping into." Click. He hung up. I stood there, breath caught halfway in my chest. He was scared, or angry, or both. That meant I was finally doing something right. I walked back to the couch. Nana was awake now, eyes glassy but alert. She looked at me and then down at the sketchbook beside her, like she already knew. "I remember the attic," I said softly. "You always said it was the only room in the house where you could breathe." She smiled faintly. "Because he never went up there. Too many stairs, not enough control." Her voice broke into a cough. I brought her water, kneeling beside her. "He called," I whispered. "He knows I have the book." Her hand moved slowly to mine. "Then you must keep going." "But I don't understand. What's in that room? The sketch. Is it from the attic?" Her lips curled into the smallest, saddest smile. "He thought he could hide everything in plain sight." "What was he hiding?" She didn't answer. Instead, she closed her eyes, her fingers brushing the edge of the sketchbook like a lullaby. Her silence said more than words. That afternoon, I flipped through the rest of the pages. I paused on one. It wasn't a room. It was a face. Torin's, but younger, sharper, painted in bold strokes, lines exaggerated, shadows deepened. His eyes, however, were blank, empty. It wasn't a portrait. It was a warning. On the next page, she'd written one sentence: "He fears what he can't rewrite." My stomach twisted. I thought back to the day he got her to sign the deed. Did she know what she was signing, or did she know exactly and give it up as bait? By sunset, the clouds rolled back in. That heavy smell of wet cement filled the apartment again. I cracked a window for air, hoping the rain would hold. I needed to think. I needed answers. But more than anything, I needed to know what that attic held. I sat at my desk and wrote down a list of what I remembered from that house. Which rooms had been remodeled, which ones he'd closed off, and which ones, like the attic, he never let me near again once Nana left. My phone buzzed again. Blocked number. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled the sketch out, staring at that table in the center of the room, the little safe, the fireplace, the books. I remembered one thing. There used to be a green velvet chair by that hearth. I'd curled up in it as a kid with my art supplies while Nana painted. Torin had always hated that chair, said it was a mildewed relic. But Nana never moved it, unless... I stared harder. In the sketch, the chair was gone. The table was in its place. Something had changed. Something had been moved to hide something else. Then my phone buzzed again. A text this time, from Torin. "If you go looking, I won't be responsible for what you find." I stared at the screen, heart hammering, and suddenly I knew. He wasn't afraid of Nana's memories. He was afraid of what was still there. I found it late that night, long after Nana had drifted into sleep again, the air in my apartment thick with the smell of eucalyptus oil and humid Seattle rain. The sketchbook lay half open on the table, and I swore I'd combed through it a dozen times already, but I hadn't looked deep enough. I turned a page gently, then noticed it, a seam that wasn't flat, a ripple tucked near the spine. I tilted the sketchbook toward the light and saw it, the edge of a sealed envelope, pressed between two glued pages. My pulse kicked. Using a butter knife, I slid carefully between the sheets until the glue gave way. The envelope slipped out, yellowed and soft around the corners, with my name on the front, written in Nana's shaky, looping script. Liora, for when you're ready. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, just one page, and a photocopy of something else folded behind it. I scanned the note first. "Sweetheart, if you found this, I trust your instincts more than ever. That house holds more than paint and bad memories. I hid something there, something your grandfather never knew, and neither did Torin. I couldn't protect it forever, so now it's yours to uncover. But be careful. Your father, he fears what he can't control. Start with the hearth. Love always, Nana." My hands grew cold. Behind the letter was the copy of a floor plan, sketched in her hand, not architectural, labeled in pen. Attic study circled in blue, but beside it a newer note scrawled in pencil. Below fireplace, panel lifts. She'd left me a map and a warning. The apartment seemed to exhale as I set the pages down. I glanced at Nana. She slept on, her breath shallow, lips parted. Her skin looked thinner than yesterday, more translucent, like time was pulling her away from me, breath by breath. I reached for my phone and took a picture of everything, just in case. Then I returned the envelope to the sketchbook and slid it back beneath the couch cushions. Just after 2 a.m., I heard tires crunch against wet asphalt. I crept to the window, lifting the edge of the curtain an inch. Torrin's car again. Parked across the street, engine off. No lights, no movement. He wasn't coming in. Not yet, but he wanted me to know he was close. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I got Nana situated on the couch and warmed up soup she barely touched. She looked past me while she sipped it, gaze unfocused, as if she were somewhere else entirely. Maybe back in that house, maybe remembering what it cost her to leave. I crouched beside her. "Nana, why the fireplace?" She blinked slowly. "Because he never touched it," she whispered. "Too cold for fire, too cold for warmth." I squeezed her hand. "There's something hidden there, isn't there?" Her lips parted, then closed again. A weak nod. Her eyes drifted shut. I waited a moment longer, but she didn't stir again. That afternoon I called in sick to work. I wasn't going in, not when something was unraveling right in front of me. I spent the next hour going over the sketchbook again, tracing every pencil line, every margin scribble. Nana's handwriting got messier toward the end, but the intent never wavered. She was leaving a trail. One sketch stopped me. It was a painting of a room I didn't recognize at first. Then it clicked. The side hallway of the Victorian. Except this version showed a door I didn't remember. Narrow, tucked behind a stack of boxes, painted to blend in with the wall. My breath caught. Was that the entrance to the hidden space? The more I studied, the more I realized she had been telling a story in fragments, scattered between flowers and landscapes and faces. A story he had tried to erase, and now she was using art to bring it back. I stood to stretch my legs when my phone buzzed again. Another message. "Let her go. You don't want to find what's in that house." I swallowed hard. This wasn't just posturing anymore. He knew I was looking, or he guessed. And he was escalating. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned back to the sketchbook, and that's when I saw it. One of the newer pages, drawn in charcoal, heavy and rough. A small box, with a lock. Tucked into the corner of the drawing, a tiny, slanted line of cursive. Key sewn into red coat lining. My heart pounded. I rushed to the closet where I'd hung up her coats after bringing her here. The red one, a vintage wool coat with a tear under one arm, still hung beside mine. I grabbed it, fingers fumbling along the inside seam, and then I felt it, a tiny hard shape tucked beneath the lining. I ripped the stitches open with scissors and slid it out. A brass key. Old, ornate, heavy in my palm. What the hell was it for? I didn't know yet. But it confirmed what I'd been afraid to believe. Nana hadn't just been documenting her memories. She'd been preparing for a reckoning. And now I was holding the first piece. I stared at the sketchbook, the key, and the envelope. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Torrin wasn't just greedy. He was afraid, because if I found what he buried, I could burn the whole illusion down. I looked back at Nana, her body still, her breath faint. Then my phone buzzed again. This time no number, just one line. "Stop digging or I'll finish what I started." The morning Nana died, the sun came out for the first time in days. Thin light spilled through the kitchen blinds, dust motes catching in its beams like slow-moving ghosts. I had just finished changing her bedding, tucking the quilt under her frail frame, when her hand slid into mine, cold, weightless. "You found it, didn't you?" she whispered. My throat tightened. "I think so. The key and the drawings." Her lips barely moved, but I caught it. Her smile. Barely there, but enough. She squeezed my fingers, or maybe I imagined it. "Don't stop, Liora, no matter what he says." "I won't." I leaned closer, brushing a strand of her silver hair from her cheek. "I promise." She closed her eyes. I sat there for another hour, watching her chest rise and fall in uneven intervals. Each breath shorter, each pause longer. I kept talking, stories from childhood, the smell of her attic, how I missed her watercolor pies with too much lemon. But somewhere in the middle of telling her about the green velvet chair she loved, her breathing stilled. Just like that. No warning, no cry, just silence. And a stillness that hit me so fast I forgot to breathe too. I didn't sob. Not right away. I just sat there, her hand still in mine, blinking as the morning light pooled around her like a soft veil. I called the nurse. Then I called no one for a while. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Only when the doorbell rang an hour later did I move again. A hospice nurse with kind eyes stepped inside, spoke in soft tones, asked me to wait in the kitchen while she made notes. I stood by the window, arms crossed, staring at the streaks of sun drying slowly on the glass. Then she approached me, something folded in her hand. "She left this with the night nurse," the woman said gently. "Said to give it to you if she didn't wake up." My hand trembled as I took it. A note. Folded 3 times. Plain paper. Nana's handwriting, scratchier now. "If you're reading this, then I'm finally free. Don't cry for me, Liora. I was already gone the day he took the house, but I never stopped fighting. I recorded everything, his threats, his deals, what he said the night he made me sign. It's on the cassette behind the blue books in the attic. Use it. Don't let him win. Love you always." E. My knees nearly gave out. I sank to the floor, note clutched to my chest like armor. She knew this day would come, and she had left me one final weapon, a tape, hidden in plain sight. I replayed her words in my mind, behind the blue books. I remembered those, textbooks from some community college class she once took in the 90s. Art theory, I think. They sat untouched for decades. Was the cassette still there? Or had he already taken it? I didn't even get the chance to move, because my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another message. "You waited too long, it's gone." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. He knew. I sprinted to the couch, grabbing Nana's sketchbook, flipping through pages until I found the attic again. The layout, the fireplace, the old chair, the bookcase. I couldn't think, couldn't plan. All I knew was that he had been watching. And now, maybe he'd gotten ahead of me. But then, my phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. I didn't want to listen, but my thumb hit play before I could think twice. His voice, cold, clear. "You brought this on yourself, Liora. You should have listened. You made this harder than it had to be. But if you think that little cassette is enough to ruin me, you don't know how deep this goes." I froze. He knew about the cassette, but how? Had someone told him? Had Maris? No, not yet. I shoved my thoughts down and pressed record on my phone, saved the voicemail, filed it under evidence. I was building a case whether he realized it or not. But my grief hadn't caught up to me yet. I hadn't cried. I hadn't let the finality of it crash through me. Not until I walked back to the living room and saw the nurse drape the blanket gently over Nana's face. Then it hit. I folded into myself on the kitchen floor, gasping through waves of sobs that made my ribs ache. I tried to keep quiet, like crying too loud would somehow wake her up. It didn't. Later that night, I packed up the sketchbook, the key, the letter, the floor plan, and the tiny brass cassette recorder I found buried under the books Nana had referenced, because somehow, some miracle, it hadn't been taken. It was there, tucked exactly where she said, with a single tape already inside. I didn't press play, not yet. I wasn't ready to hear his voice from years ago, but soon I would. Because grief was turning into something else now. Not just pain, fuel. He thought her death would silence her, but it had done the opposite. And the cassette she left behind? Could that recording bring him down? I didn't sleep the night after Nana died. Her scent still lingered in the apartment, lavender, turpentine, and chamomile, settling like fog in every corner. The cassette sat on the table in front of me, taunting me. I hadn't pressed play. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear her voice recorded in a past she tried to protect me from. At 3:12 a.m., I opened the sketchbook again, pages worn, corners curled, her handwriting barely legible in some places. That's when I saw it, something I'd missed. A folded letter taped inside the back cover, thinner than the others. I peeled it open with shaking fingers. Liora, there was a second will. I wrote it after he threatened me the first time. I didn't trust the lawyers he sent, so I made my own. I gave a copy to someone I trusted. The real one is hidden, in the attic, tucked behind the last beam on the north wall, under the floorboards. If you find it, get help. Find Clara. She knows what to do. Please, don't go to Maris. She made her choice a long time ago. I love you. I read it twice, then a third time, slower, a second will, one she made without Torrin's lawyers, one that could undo everything. The attic, north wall, beneath the floorboards. A heat bloomed in my chest. Not hope, not yet, but movement, purpose, proof that she hadn't surrendered quietly. She had fought in her own quiet, meticulous way. Now it was my turn. At dawn, I called Clara. She answered on the second ring, her voice gravelly but alert. "Liora?" "It's about Nana," I said. "She's gone, but she left something behind." A pause. "What kind of something?" "A second will. She said she gave you a copy. Did she?" Another pause, longer this time. "Come to my office. Bring everything." I tucked the letter into a folder with the cassette, the sketchbook, the key, and a copy of the floor plan. When I walked out the door, I half expected Torrin's car to be waiting across the street again. It wasn't, but I still felt watched. Clara's office was in a small brick building just off Capitol Hill, nestled between a dentist's clinic and a boarded-up bookstore. I climbed the narrow staircase, buzzed twice, and waited until the heavy glass door clicked open. She looked older than I remembered, silver streaks cutting through her dark hair, glasses perched low on her nose, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. I handed her the folder. She skimmed the contents in silence, her brow furrowing deeper with every line. "She really made a second will. She said she didn't trust the lawyers he hired. Can you blame her?" Clara didn't answer. She just flipped the page, then closed the folder with a sigh. "If it's real, and if we can locate the original, we can challenge the one on file. But it's going to be ugly." I nodded. "I don't care. She didn't want him to win." "And you're sure about what's in the attic?" I pulled out the letter. She said behind the last beam on the north wall, under the floorboards. Clara studied it. "Then we'd better find it before Torrin does." As if on cue, her office phone buzzed. She picked up. "Clara Hensley." Her face changed as she listened, eyes narrowing, lips pressing tight. "Yes," she said eventually. "She's here." Pause. "No, she's not alone." Another pause. "She won't be intimidated, and neither will I." She hung up and met my eyes. "That was him," she said. "He knows you came to me." My stomach sank. "He said if you keep stirring things up, he'll bury this case before it begins." "He's bluffing." "No, he's not. But that doesn't mean we back down." Clara opened a drawer and pulled out a legal notepad. "If that second will exists and we can prove coercion with the first, we have a case. But we need that original copy, and we need to move fast." I left her office with a printed injunction request and a heart pounding so hard I could barely hear the traffic around me. My palms were sweating, but I also had something else. A direction. I called a locksmith on my way home. Told them I needed help accessing a sealed attic space. Just a precaution, I told myself, just in case the safe in the drawing existed. That night, I packed a small bag with gloves, the key, a flashlight, and every document I'd collected. I barely noticed the rain starting again until it pelted the roof hard enough to make the walls hum. Then someone knocked on my door. I froze. 3 knocks. Calm, precise. I opened it slowly. And there he was, Torrin, suit perfectly pressed, rain glistening in his hair. No umbrella. "May I come in?" he asked, voice smooth. "No." He took a breath, looked past me into the apartment. "Is it true?" he said. "She's gone?" I didn't answer. He took a step forward. I didn't move. "You think you've got something," he said, eyes narrowing. "But you don't. All you've got are sketches and whispers." "Then why are you here?" I said. He stared at me for a long beat, then smiled. "Because you're my daughter," he said, "and I'm trying to save you from turning into your grandmother." My chest tightened. My hands clenched. "You don't get to talk about her. You think she was a saint? She was selfish, Liora. She kept things from all of us. She built her own prison and blamed me for locking the door." "I think," I said, voice shaking, "she finally outsmarted you." His eyes flashed. "Be careful." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain like a threat never fully spoken. I shut the door, locked it twice, and looked back at my table where the letter and map waited like an invitation. Torrin had confronted me, but what he didn't know was that tomorrow I was going back into that house. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried its weight. That damp, metallic scent hung low, clinging to the old trees that lined the sidewalk. I stood in front of Nana's house, the house that was no longer hers, key in hand, heart thudding like a warning. The house looked different now, or maybe I had. Either way, I felt it. Something had shifted. The curtains were drawn tighter than usual. The porch light still burned, even in daylight. A camera had been mounted above the doorframe since I was last here. Torrin's touch, subtle control, always watching. I slipped the key into the lock and stepped inside. The air hit me like a wave. Lemon cleaner, wood polish, and something colder underneath. The warmth was gone. Nana's scent had been scrubbed out. Her plants, her stacked books, her scarves draped over the banister, gone. He was erasing her. Room by room, the living room felt hollow. Empty shelves, covered furniture. I moved quickly, boots muffled by the heavy rugs as I made my way to the attic stairs. The old steps creaked beneath me like they always had, but now every sound felt sharper, like the house itself was holding its breath. At the top, I paused. The attic door was closed. It had never been closed before. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Dust spiraled in golden shafts of light from the skylight. The stained glass panels still painted kaleidoscopic patterns across the warped wooden floor. Her easel was gone, but the paint splatters remained like ghosts she'd left behind. I crossed to the far wall, the north side, just like the letter said, the last beam, beneath the floorboards. I pulled out my flashlight, shining it across the planks. My fingers trembled as I searched for seams, and then, there, a board just slightly lighter than the others. I wedged my fingers beneath the edge, pried it up with slow, careful pressure. My breath caught. A small metal lockbox, dusty, unmarked. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the ornate brass key, slid it into the lock, turned. It clicked open. Inside, folded legal papers, handwritten notes, and at the very bottom, a sealed envelope marked, "For Clara," and another, addressed simply, "To be opened only if Torrin challenges the estate." I stood there in silence, heart pounding, chest tight. She'd done it. She really had. I slipped the contents into my bag and closed the box, but I didn't move yet. I turned back toward the skylight and froze. Torrin stood at the top of the attic stairs. He didn't speak, just stared at me, eyes narrowed, jaw clenched so hard I thought it might crack. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally. "I'm exactly where I need to be." "You broke in." "I used Nana's key. You remember her, right? The woman you left to die in a storm?" His lips curled, almost a smirk. "That's cute, playing hero." "I found the will," I said, stepping closer. "The real one." His smile disappeared. "You don't want to do this," he said flatly. "I think I already did." He moved toward me slowly, each step deliberate. "You think some dusty document's going to undo everything I've built?" "No," I said, "but Nana's recording might." He stopped. "What recording?" My pulse roared in my ears. I hadn't meant to say it, not yet, but it was too late to pull it back. "You know," I said, "the one where she talks about your threats, the night you made her sign, the lies, the coercion." He stared at me for a long, hard second. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "You think anyone's going to believe an old woman's tape? You think I haven't covered every angle?" I took a step forward, chin high, fingers clutching the strap of my bag. "I think you're scared." "Of what?" "Of being exposed, of people finally seeing you for what you are." His jaw tightened. "You're just like her," he said. "Stubborn, sentimental, and too blind to see what's real." "Maybe, but she saw you clearly in the end. That's why she left this behind." His hands curled into fists. Then, footsteps on the stairs behind him. We both turned. Clara. She stepped into the attic with a folder in hand and fire in her eyes. "Mr. Merritt," she said coolly, "you're in violation of the temporary injunction. This house is under legal review pending verification of the revised estate documents. You don't have that authority." "Try me," she said, "or better yet, take it up with the judge. I just filed an emergency motion this morning. You'll be served by noon." Torrin turned to me, fury simmering just under his skin. "This isn't over," he said. "No," I said softly. "It's just beginning." He stepped back, brushing past Clara as he left. His shadow disappeared down the staircase, but his presence lingered, thick and bitter. Clara turned to me. "Is that the will?" I handed her the folder. "Original, with witness signatures, and this was addressed to you." She opened the envelope, scanned the page inside. Her expression shifted, something between shock and grim satisfaction. "She set this up perfectly," she said. I felt my knees weaken and sat on the edge of the old window bench, heart still racing. "I thought I was making this up," I said, "that maybe I'd imagined her strength." "You didn't," Clara said. "She just needed someone to finish what she started." I looked down at my hands, now stained faintly with dust and ink. But before I could catch my breath, Clara's phone buzzed. She answered, frowning. When she hung up, her face had gone pale. "What?" "That was the clerk's office," she said. "Torrin filed a motion to suppress all evidence related to Nana's mental state, including the cassette. He's trying to get the whole case tossed. He can't do that. If he proves she was medically unfit, it weakens everything. But we have her voice," I said. "The recording, her words, her fear, that has to count for something." Clara looked at me. "Then it's time to make it public." The audio file went live at 10:07 a.m. Clara had helped me clean it up, digitally boost the volume, cut out the static, isolate Nana's voice from the tape's old hiss. It wasn't pristine, but it was enough. I posted it with trembling fingers, a simple upload to a local community outlet with the headline, "Seattle Heiress Forced to Sign Estate Under Duress. Family Speaks Out After Her Death." Then I watched and waited. By noon, the article had been shared over 4,000 times. By 3 p.m., my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. A few calls from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A text from a childhood friend I didn't even know followed the news. Then a voicemail I wasn't expecting from a reporter at K5 News. And with it, everything changed. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Nana's trembling voice filled the airwaves. Her words, broken and honest and unmistakably real, played over B-roll of the Victorian house, photos of her painting in the attic, snapshots of me helping her into the apartment weeks before she passed. The caption under my face read, "Granddaughter seeks justice after elder abuse allegations." The comment section was brutal. Some praised me, some blamed me, some asked why I hadn't come forward sooner, but none of them questioned who he was now. By dinner time, Torrin's face was on every local channel, sharpened in unflattering freeze frames, caught mid-sentence in a hearing, walking stiffly past a swarm of cameras. Clara called around 6:30. "They froze his assets." My breath caught. "Already?" Emergency injunction passed through probate court. We cited potential fraud in the will process and backed it with the recording. That cassette just bought us leverage. I stared at the wall in front of me. Nana's voice had finally done what mine never could. "Maris hasn't said anything?" I asked. Clara hesitated. "Not yet." But that changed less than an hour later. I was making tea when my phone rang again, her name flashing on the screen like a ghost. I stared at it for a full ring, then picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "They came to my door. Reporters." I said nothing. "I didn't know it would get this far," she said. "I thought he told me it would be quiet, clean." "Clean," I repeated. "You call what happened to Nana clean?" Her breath hitched. "He made me believe it was for the best, that she was slipping, that she didn't know what she was signing." "She knew, Maris. She was scared, and you let him isolate her." Silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I have something." My grip on the phone tightened. "What do you mean?" "He made me sign something too," she said. "A non-disclosure, years ago. Said if I ever spoke about the will or the conditions, he'd expose something I did." "What did you do?" Another pause. "I gave him power of attorney," she whispered, "years before she got sick, when you were still in college. I didn't understand what it meant until it was too late." I sank slowly into the kitchen chair. "You signed over her rights?" "I thought I was protecting her. I didn't know what he'd do with it." "But he used it to silence her," I said. "Yes." My voice dropped. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm tired of covering for him, and because I think Nana left me something too." I blinked. "What?" "There was a letter. Unopened. I kept it hidden for years. Do you still have it? She hesitated. I think it's time you read it, she said. Come by tomorrow. I'll leave it out. I'm not ready to talk face to face. The call ended. I just sat there, letting the weight of everything settle into my bones. Maris, who I thought had chosen silence forever, was finally cracking. But the pressure wasn't just breaking her, it was breaking him too. Clara called again at 9 p.m. There's a new filing. He's trying to suppress everything, including the recording. On what grounds? Mental instability. He's claiming Nana wasn't of sound mind, and that you manipulated her into making the new will. That's a lie. Of course it is. But he's trying to flip the narrative. And? We're pushing back, hard, but it's going to get uglier before it gets cleaner. I opened my laptop. The story was trending. Reddit, Twitter, local Facebook groups, everyone had a theory, a side. But one thing was clear, he was losing control of the story. I watched the interview clip of him leaving court earlier that afternoon, shoving a mic aside, face tight, jaw ticking. When asked if he had anything to say to his daughter, he replied, "No comment, but she'll regret this." That was all the public needed. Threat on tape, abuse on record, and now, a trail of signatures and silences finally seeing daylight. I logged off and closed my eyes for a moment. It should have felt like a win, but something in me still twisted. Nana was gone, and even if I won, it wouldn't bring her back, but it might stop him. The next morning, before I could leave for Maris's house, my phone lit up again. Unknown number. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up. "You've made your point," Torrin said. "Now I'm going to make mine." I didn't respond to Torrin's call. I let his words hang there. "Now I'm going to make mine," and dropped the phone into my bag like it was burning my hand. I drove straight to Maris's house. The streets were wet from a dawn drizzle, the tires whispering over the pavement. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see his car following me. He hadn't made a move in public, not yet, but there was a crack in him now, and I could feel it widening. Maris's porch light was on when I pulled up. She hadn't come outside, just left the door unlocked, like she was offering me a truce without having to say the words out loud. Inside, her house was silent, too clean, too careful. On the entry table, next to a bowl of old keys and unopened mail, sat a worn envelope with my name on it. I picked it up. The flap wasn't sealed. I pulled out a letter and read it while standing in the same hallway where she once told me to stop asking questions about Nana's decline. "Liora, I should have told you everything sooner. I was afraid, not just of him, but of what it said about me that I stood by and watched. I was weak, and I let him tell me weakness was loyalty. But your grandmother, she never gave up. She told me once there were things buried in that house that even Torrin didn't know about. She said he was too proud to look in places that weren't about money. There's a small attic crawl space off the guest room. You have to pull up the carpet to reach it. She kept something there, something he never touched. I hope it helps. I hope someday you'll forgive me." Maris, the crawl space, another hidden place, another secret tucked into the bones of that house. I folded the letter and left without saying a word. Clara met me back at the Victorian by noon. The injunction had been granted, a temporary hold on the house and its contents. For now, we had legal access, but Torrin's lawyer was already circling, calling the judge's office, contesting the jurisdiction, claiming unauthorized tampering. Clara stood guard while I pulled back the carpet in the guest room. It was faded rose pink, the kind Nana would have chosen in the 80s and refused to replace. In the corner, barely visible unless you knew to look, a small hinged door was cut into the floorboard. I pried it open. The space was tight, dry, and smelled of cedar and dust. I crawled in with a flashlight clenched between my teeth. It didn't take long. In the corner, wrapped in layers of cloth, was a wooden artist's box. I pulled it out gently, sat back on the floor, and opened it. Inside, stacks of small canvas boards, each wrapped in brown paper. But one wasn't wrapped. It was a painting. Nana's style was unmistakable. Fine lines, layers of warm oils, careful strokes that held breath and sorrow in the same brush. It was a portrait. Of me. Not as a child, but now. The background was a blur of reds and storm grays, like a house on fire under a thundercloud. But the figure at the center, me, stood in sharp relief, strong, hands at her sides, eyes forward, brave. I didn't remember her painting this, but she had seen it in me before I ever did. Behind the painting was an envelope marked Trust Instructions. I opened it. Inside, detailed instructions for the distribution of funds from a hidden trust. Not for the family, not for the estate, but for a community elder shelter, something she'd drafted and funded quietly over years, using the proceeds of her paintings, speaking engagements, and 2 inheritance payouts I hadn't known about. Clara leaned over my shoulder, reading as I did. She set up a trust for elder care? Completely separate from the estate, I whispered. He had no idea. Clara smiled for the first time in days. This changes everything. We scanned the documents, finding routing numbers, notarized pages, her signature at the bottom in steady ink. She didn't just want justice, I said. She wanted something better after all of this, for someone else. But as I gathered the papers, Clara's phone buzzed again. She answered, her voice shifting quickly from calm to coiled. "That's not possible," she said. "You can't—" "Wait, say that again?" I stared at her. "What?" She hung up. "Torin's lawyer just filed an emergency settlement proposal." "What kind of settlement?" "He wants to relinquish all claims to the house and the will in exchange for suppressing the recording from court." I blinked. "He's trying to disappear the tape?" "He's scared of public fallout. That tape could cost him every contract, every board seat. If it enters public evidence, it's forever. He wants to make it vanish." I looked down at the folder in my lap, at the portrait beside me. "Do we take it?" "That's up to you," she said. "But there's one more thing." "What?" "We traced one of the trust fund deposits. One of the banks flagged it months ago because of a mismatched signature." My pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" Clara's voice lowered. "It means someone may have accessed part of the trust without her permission before she died." My chest clenched. "Torin?" "We don't know yet. But if he found out about the shelter plan early—" A chill ran down my spine. "What fortune did Nana leave behind?" I asked quietly. "And who had already tried to steal it?" It rained the morning the house was signed over, but it wasn't the stormy, suffocating kind we'd lived under for weeks. It was soft, almost cleansing, the kind that made the old bricks of the Victorian glisten and the porch smell like memory and pine. Clara and I stood under the wide eaves as the notary flipped through the final pages, his gloved hands barely pausing. My fingers hovered near my chest, pressing against the edge of Nana's trust letter tucked inside my coat pocket. I hadn't slept the night before, even though we had the documentation, the trust, the notarized instructions. Even though Torin had gone quiet after the threat of public hearings, there was still something unsettled, a weight beneath the justice, an ache that hadn't lifted. Clara nudged me gently. "This is it." I nodded. My name signed at the bottom of the transfer documents with a pen that felt heavier than it should have. The house was no longer in probate, no longer under threat. It was mine, but not for long, because Nana had made her wishes clear. This wasn't for inheritance. It was for impact. The renovations had already begun. Volunteers arrived the moment the legal freeze was lifted. Painters, plumbers, local artists, a retired architect who said Nana once let him sketch her in the garden back in 1993. They came with rolled-up blueprints and folded hearts, and soon her house would become something new, Elise's haven, a shelter, a studio, a place for the forgotten. It still didn't feel real. Inside, the wallpaper had been stripped, leaving behind ghost outlines of picture frames. The attic had been swept clean, the boxes cataloged, the trust fund fully intact, now waiting for transfer to a foundation under Clara's supervision. But part of me still lingered at the threshold, unsure if stepping forward meant leaving something behind. In the parlor, I stood before Nana's portrait of me, the one she hid away in the crawl space. We hung it near the fireplace. Not to celebrate me, but to remind every woman who walked through the front door, you are still standing, you are not done. As I stared at it now, I realized the face in the painting didn't look afraid anymore. I wasn't sure when that had changed. Outside, a knock pulled me from my thoughts. I opened the front door expecting Clara, but it was Torin. No suit this time, just jeans, a jacket, and that same practiced stillness he always wore when he wanted something. "I'm not here to fight," he said. I didn't answer, just stepped out and closed the door behind me. We stood beneath the porch light, mist gathering on our shoulders. "I heard you rejected the settlement," he said finally. "I did. You know what's going to happen." "I do," I said, "and I'm not afraid of court." His lips twisted into something halfway between a smile and a snarl. "You always were more like her. That's the only compliment you've ever given me." Silence stretched between us. Then his voice dropped. "I didn't touch the trust," he said. "I didn't even know about it." I narrowed my eyes. "Then how did the signature mismatch happen?" "I don't know, but it wasn't me." I searched his face, looking for the usual lie, but this time he looked tired, worn. "You expect me to believe that now?" I asked. "No, but maybe someday you'll realize I lost too." I blinked. "You didn't lose her. You threw her away." He didn't reply. Instead, he stepped back, nodding once toward the door behind me. "She'd be proud of what you're doing here." Then he turned and walked down the path, disappearing into the drizzle. I stood frozen, not from fear this time, but from the sting of those last words, because part of me wanted to believe he meant them. Later that afternoon, Clara and I sat on the floor of the attic, sorting through the final stack of Nana's boxes. Beneath a bundle of oilcloths, I found a bundle of old paintings, but one caught my breath. It wasn't a landscape or a still life. It was a room, not the house, not any room I recognized. A studio, bright, lined with windows, shelves full of art supplies, and in the center an easel with a child painting. I turned it over, on the back, written in ink, "The dream, for the ones still dreaming." Clara leaned in. "She imagined it before she ever wrote the trust." I smiled. "She imagined all of this before we even knew it mattered." Downstairs, I heard the front door creak open and soft voices echo through the hallway. The first two women had arrived early, new residents from a temporary housing center nearby. I took a breath and stood. Time to welcome them. But before I could move, my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. The trust wasn't all she left behind. Look deeper. My heart kicked. I showed Clara the screen, her brow furrowed. "Still him?" "I don't think so." "Then who?" I looked around the attic again, at the beams, the floors, the old chests we hadn't opened. Then I said it out loud. "I don't think we've found everything yet." It rained again the day we opened Elise's Haven. Not the kind that made you retreat, but the kind that felt like a blessing, soft, steady, and cleansing. I stood on the front porch in my boots, Nana's red scarf looped around my neck. The porch railings were freshly painted. The lights were warm. The sign over the door read, "Welcome Home." Inside, laughter spilled down the hallway as volunteers helped a new resident unpack. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon bread and lemon oil. Clara was in the study with a clipboard, reviewing final paperwork with the foundation team, and I stood still, letting the rain brush against my cheeks. I thought about the message. The trust wasn't all she left behind. Look deeper. It hadn't come from Torin. It came from an anonymous email sent from a library computer. No IP, no trail, but it had one attachment, an image of a safety deposit box receipt, under Nana's name. Opened 15 years ago. Never closed. The bank had no record of access since the year I left for college. I visited it 3 days ago. Inside, I found one final envelope. No signature, just a single sheet of parchment and a faded photograph. Nana as a young woman, standing in front of a shelter nearly identical to this one, arms folded, chin raised, eyes fierce. The note read, "If you're reading this, then the rest worked. Use this to finish what I couldn't." Attached to the back was the original deed to the property, signed over not just to me, but to a nonprofit entity she'd quietly formed decades ago, one that had never been activated. Until now. I registered it the next morning. Her legacy wasn't just a building, it was a vision she'd carried her whole life, and she trusted me to carry it next. The legal battles quieted after that. Torin withdrew his motion to suppress. Public pressure had escalated too fast, too loud. His firm distanced itself. His name disappeared from 2 boards in less than a week. Maris called once more, not to explain, just to say she was glad Nana's name was being honored. I didn't ask if she meant it. Some truths don't need repeating. I didn't press charges for the forged bank transfer. The funds were returned, and we channeled them directly into the shelter's programs. But we kept the investigation open, in case someone ever tried again. Torin never came back. The house, this house, never belonged to him anyway. Some things can't be owned. Today, as I stood on the porch with Nana's scarf pressed to my collarbone, I finally understood what she meant when she used to say that rain was the world's way of starting over. Because this felt like a beginning, not an ending. A young woman stepped up the walkway, pulling a suitcase behind her. She looked up at the sign, then at me. "You Liora?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled nervously. "They said I could stay here for a while." "You can," I said softly, stepping aside. "You're safe now." As she passed me, I caught my reflection in the front window. Just a flicker, but it stopped me. I didn't look like the woman from the first day, the one who carried Nana's soaked body inside, wondering how far a storm could go. Now I stood straighter, quieter, but fuller somehow. I walked down the steps and tied the red scarf around the railing, the same one Nana used to wear on cold painting mornings. I didn't say anything dramatic, didn't whisper to the wind or call her name. I just smiled, because I knew. She was here, in every room, in every brushstroke on the wall, in every woman who came through the door hoping for something more than survival. And maybe that was the lesson all along. Family isn't blood. It's who stands beside you in the storm, who builds you shelter when everyone else walks away. It's who believes you even when the world doesn't. That night, as the rain picked up again, I turned on the porch light. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt free. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Like, comment, and share to help others discover the truth behind the storm. And if you want more justice-filled dramas, check out the next video. We're just getting started.